Hello and welcome, everyone. You're very welcome to Forge Talk 12, where we're going to be discussing all the bits that we've released so far about Durin's folk and maybe some extra bits as well. I'm Claire. I'm the community manager. You probably see me making announcements and popping in and out of chat on the Discord. And you're all very, very welcome.
Hmm. Okay.
Did you guys
And I'm
want
yeah. Sorry.
to?
We are out of practice. Wow. Okay. We've done how many of these have we done? Like 13 of them, and we're still talking over each other.
Mhm.
Um, I'm Jon-Paul. I'm the game director from Free Range Games, and have been working on this game since late 2020. So we're still going. So
Mm.
excited to talk about. Is this our first like kind of Durance folk focused? We did one right after Comic-Con, right?
Yeah, we did one
This
with
is our
kind of like
second
we
our
do
second
a big
expansion one.
reveal. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and that's me. Yeah,
Hi.
you see me as Tharkin in here. So yeah,
Well,
go
they
ahead.
can see
Sorry.
your name tag right there under your profile.
Oh
um,
man, you just okay boomered me.
the mystery. Hi, everyone. I am Bradley. I'm the art director here in Moria, and glad to be here.
Awesome. So I'd say we're probably best off just diving right into it. So I know that there's going to be some stuff that we've covered already in the blogs. If you haven't read them, I'll drop them into the chat for you as well.
Mhm.
And if you're listening to this not live, they'll be in the description below. Hey, remember to do that this time. Um, so yeah, like the first, I suppose the big thing that everyone's really excited about and the community has asked for a very long time is NPCs. So do you want to talk a bit
Yeah.
more about that and how that
Yeah,
came
we
to
sort
be
of
and what it is?
the last Forge talk we sort of teased that we said they're going to be NPCs, and now that we've done the blog and we've talked about it, and pretty soon we should do a video to show it in action. We haven't had a chance to do that yet. So yeah, NPCs. I mean, we're basically the expansion starts, as you can tell from the get to the gate. There are two immediate ways that you're going to be able to play with NPCs. The first one will be for everybody, regardless of whether you finished the campaign or if you're playing in sandbox. Is you will find as you're exploring in the campaign part of the game, you'll find other survivors of Gimli's company that survived the explosion. And so you'll be able to find them, rescue them, and then bring them back to, you will then, basically build an object that will designate one of your bases as this is the base where the NPCs can live. And then they will spawn there and they will be a part of your group. The survivors, and eventually when you start recruiting new dwarves to come in, they're not heroes in the way that the players are, and so the players are the heroes that will go and adventure and fight orcs and take down orc towns and solve mysteries. And then the NPC dwarves are the other dwarves, the support dwarves, the blacksmiths, the cooks, the guards around the base, and they will stay in and around the base area. We call it a delving is the new word we're using. A delving is sort of like a village, a dwarven village. And so you will, if you haven't beaten the campaign, you're still in the middle of it. Either if you start fresh, or if you're in the middle of it, or even if you're at the end, you can go back and still go find these people because these dwarves, because we're gonna deal them into every world, every existing world, not just new worlds. And you will be able to find them and bring them back. So that way, anybody that gets the expansion, regardless of how far you've gotten into the story, will have an opportunity to have some NPCs kind of hang around their base and do stuff. Um, yeah, so that's kind of one thing. And then the next part will be, if you have beaten the campaign, then we're going to start moving the timeline forward a little bit, and you will have a conversation. If you remember the emissary from um the but the guy that was like plan B in the cinematic at the beginning, he comes back speaking for the king under the mountain, and you basically agree it's okay to start bringing dwarves in. And so dwarves kind of hear this call and start showing up at the a sort of ramshackle camp that forms outside the Dimmerl Gate. And you can go and talk to them, and they cycle over time. And inspired by some of my favorite games, where you kind of go to a tavern and pick people to be a part of your company. So you'll go and you'll talk to them, and you'll see a little bit about them, and then if you like them, then you pay their wages in advance, because they're dwarves. And so they're going to come in, and then they'll be a part of your company. And so we're basically calling them, dwarves of your company, or company dwarves. And that'll be the in-game name for NPCs. That's a big one. So
Yeah.
that's sort of, and then once you have that, you're going to have the NPCs, and then you're going to get to play with having somebody there with you. So, and you can give them, yeah. I mean, Bradley, you want to add anything to that before I go? I could probably sit here for an hour and just describe the entire expansion, which is probably not the most entertaining way to do it. So I'll take a breath.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing a few comments in the chat. Like, our hope is that it really is kind of transformative. That once you get to this end game stage, like you're still thinking about the goals of building your economy, but you've got a lot more assistance in doing it. And then we wanted to fill some of the roles or some of the work that you might be doing yourself, like say restoration would be one of those things. All those damaged buildings. One of the jobs is to fix all those things. Do that in an automated way. Gathering materials, converting ore into metal to be used, and that really just kind of turbocharges the experience.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the economy?
Yeah, and that's the trading camp, and then we can maybe talk about kind of the daily cycle and sort of how the NPCs work. Once you have the NPCs, and one of the things we want to do is like, well, what do I do with them? And I hope you guys like it when we kind of get under the hood of the sort of game design reasons behind some of the things. So that's what I like about these Forge talks, is sort of explaining that stuff. And we knew we wanted NPCs, and we started with, well, why do we want NPCs? Why do our players want NPCs? And obviously we've been seeing requests for that. And I don't want to be lonely. It's kind of weird when I'm by myself. And that's one thing. I think there's a lot of players. I would say probably the biggest inspiration, Bradley, was we were judging, I can't remember which particular building contest we were judging, but I think it was sort of fall last year, almost a year ago. And we were watching, and I can't remember who it was, so I'm sorry, I normally would shout you out, but had made a tavern in the building contest, and had used the mannequins, the armor stands, and had put them in all the places where people would, and made a tavern scene. And so when we saw that, we realized that there's a strong reason for NPCs, not just for some mechanical min-max inflow and outflow of resources or progression reason, but part of the reason to have NPCs was simply to feel like you are able to build a dwarven village and watch it be alive. And so that became one of our primary pillars, is how do we not just give you 20 buttons that you have to push and order around and micromanage, but how does it feel like you are the protector of the first brave dwarves to come back in and move back in. And so that became a really primary pillar, just being able to, we call it kind of playing house. Like, we want you to be able to play house with the dwarves. And that kind of goes to, and we've always had this sort of like this, duality to the game of sort of, it's a bit cozy around the hearth fire, and it's a bit dangerous survival when you go outside. And so, but to the topic you're bringing up, Bradley, we also wanted, well, what do I do with them? What do they do? Why are they even here? And so that's where we had the idea of, well, we've always talked about, you have kind of this crazy surplus of riches in Moria. I bet everybody would start knocking on your door saying, hey, can I have some mithril, please? I'll give you something for it. And so that's where we came up with this idea that the other gate, put aside, we're being a little fast and loose with like would the trader representing Lorien really have gone all the way around to the west gate instead of just being at the, but for sort of game and development reasons, it was a little easier to say Dimril Gate side is where you recruit new people, west gate side is where you do your trading. And so it's hopefully you guys forgive us for that very slight inaccuracy. But you would go out the west gate, and if you remember, for those of you who saw the sort of Easter egg cinematic, there was a promise made, and this is the fulfilling of that promise, which is now there are traders there, and so you can walk up to them, and it's sort of simulating a barter economy. You know, Professor Tolkien, he hints at currency, but we wanted to be careful to not inadvertently project a modern global economy on Middle Earth, which we didn't feel was realistic. So in this case, you know, if you go to a trader and the trader represents the Blue Mountains, you can trade things to the Blue Mountains trader and then gain essentially kind of a form of reputation with that trader. And then you can get things back from that trader by, you know, expending or using that reputation. And so that's really how it ends up working. So if you want something from the Red Mountains trader, you want the you know, if you want the red sandstone, the new kind of stone that lets you now build a whole new building set that is red and crimson colored, you need to trade things that the Red Mountains trader wants, so that you can get the stuff and unlock the recipes for that. And then same for the white marble set that you would get from the Blue Mountains trader, and all kinds of other things. So some of it was kind of having fun of like, in fourth age, okay, what's the state of Rivendell, what's the state of Lorien, and what would they want, what would they have that Moria would want. And so that was actually, I think, really a fun design task to sort of think that through. And I know I mentioned the elves. I know that's a question's come up. um you know, for development reasons, and also a little bit for lore reasons, we're saying that for now the dwarves they're being a bit ostentatious by building this new facade to the west gate, but they're also only dealing in dwarven traders. So you're basically dealing with middlemen, a dwarf that is there that's representing, hey, like they went to Lorien, made some trades with Lorien, and came back. And so you're only going to ever have dwarves in the camps. We all would have loved to have seen an elf, but it wasn't in the cards this summer.
Yeah, I think they're also still a little suspicious. Like, you know, we might be getting the King Under the Mountain to come around to this your success, you know, in the future of Khazad-dûm, but I think the other people in Middle Earth are maybe looking. They're watching, and so, you know, the dwarven traders are ranging out and starting to establish those contacts.
Yeah. And each trader is going to have, they're also going to have unique things that you're going to want from them that might take you a little while to build up the reputation to get them. And that can be, some of them are unlocks that make NPCs better. Some of them are building sets. Some of them are like, you know, what do you do with the pottery and obsidian from the Red Mountains and things like that. So there's some neat things in there. And we also think of, you know, I really think of the trading camp and to some extent the expeditions as kind of a first version of features that give us an ability to start adding content to the game in an interesting way that may allow us to do it. Like you could imagine traders and in I don't want to promise anything, so let's not get too our hopes up too much. But you could imagine a future title update that now there is a new trader, or there is new stuff that the Rivendell trader has for you, or if we wanted to introduce a new building set, suddenly it shows up in one of the traders' inventory. And so, same thing with if we wanted to have a little bit of interesting story or a new kind of enemy or something, we could plop a new kind of expedition down. So in both of these cases, I think we got pretty ambitious with the update. And so I still, in my mind, think of the trading camp and the expeditions as a first version, and with lots and lots of room to grow and get better.
I think it's also worth mentioning because it's mentioned in one of the first blogs. I think that like just thinking about dwarves being wary and stuff, the king is kind of only trusting you with so many NPCs, so it
Yes.
probably makes sense the same maybe might overlap to the camps at either gate as well. That like let's just be careful with how we proceed and that sort of thing.
Yes. Yeah, and I think there was a couple of questions about the max. And we're in this update, we're saying 21 is the total number of dwarves you'll be able to move in. So that means plus if you were playing with a full eight player game, you'd be at 29 total dwarves that are in the mountain. And it's funny, when we made that decision, part of that decision was there was a design reason and there was a technical reason. The technical reason was every dwarf can add to the frame rate, or can lower the frame rate, and so we needed to really find some way to have a good amount without going crazy. But also on the design side, we were thinking, well, it's kind of a different game, depending on how many. If you said, hey, it's a game where there's 6 NPCs, what games do you think of? You probably think of like a Dragon Age, or a game like that, and that's kind of a different, or Mass Effect. I'm showing my age, but games like that where you think, oh, there's only 6 of them. Well, they're going to be really deep. They're going to be really interesting. And then you go the other direction. And you say, well, there's 200, and you go, oh, well, that's kind of Frostpunk. That's almost a city manager, which didn't feel like the DNA of our game quite yet. And so we were kind of going back and forth, like, what's enough that it feels like. And so we eventually just kind of found a story that we felt was really interesting. And I was like, I want to go down into the deeps, and I want to make a tavern, and I want to put a raven crest on the door. And I want to walk into the tavern with the raven crest and see a tavern scene. And how can I do that? And so that's where we landed. Well, okay, how many do you need to really make that feel good? And so uh, I would say once you get above about 8 NPCs, then you'll probably be glad that they're very autonomous, which we should talk about. Because if you were micromanaging all of them, it would be a lot of work. It would be a lot of like running over, and tapping a guy and telling him to do stuff. Because we try to avoid a lot of gameplay in menus. We try to make it in the world. So um,
Yeah, that was one of our principles is we wanted to keep the experience true to what the core experience of the survival game is. It leads up to that, which is that you are there. We're never, say, taking camera control away. We're never going into like a god mode where we're looking down from above. If you want to interact with an NPC, you walk up to them, and you interact with them directly. And pretty quickly, if you got to a population of larger than what we have, you would just start to lose a sense of who is where, because the only way you can find them is by just going to where they live,
right.
And talking to them directly.
And it's going to take a little while to get up to 20. So it's not like you're going to open up the recruiting camp, and you're not going to light Durin's beacon and then have 20 in day one. It's going to take a little while, and that's probably good because you'll get used to having them. And there is there's an underlying concept, which is there are going to be some constraints that I think will hopefully be fun for players. How many delvings can you have at the beginning? How do you level up the delvings? And then how do you get to have more delvings and raise the level cap on the delvings? And as you basically recruit in NPCs that are really good at building, then you give them these kind of monumental, great monument, gigantic building projects, and they sink multiple days. You put like 4 NPCs on them, and they're sitting there hammering for multiple game days. And then when it's built, that will give you an upgrade that will unlock another delving, or raise the level cap, or the things like that, or maybe make new delvings start at level 3 instead of level 1, things like that. So and those, I think, I'm pretty excited when we do a blog to show those off, because I think Bradley, the art team, really made these. We tried to push the envelope. What's the what's the biggest thing in the game? The King's Brew Tank. How can you go bigger than that?
Yeah.
And then why would it feel like, we try to base that off of, if you've read a book or know the sort of history of things like Pillars of Heaven, where it's like it takes a long time to build something big. And what would the dwarves build if they had like just carte blanche to do it? And what would they build if they were basically trying to create, they're trying to let everyone know we're here, and we're back. So yeah, those, I think those were probably pretty fun to visualize.
Yeah, they were an opportunity for us to also just make something that we hope players will find really cool, and then get at The basis behind them is very lore centric. Like getting at what the essential sort of things that dwarves honor and respect, like what those things are. So
Mhm.
each one of them is meant to reflect something about the dwarven spirit.
Yeah. Yeah, and the builder is just sort of one role, and so the sort of day in the life of an NPC. This is the other thing we wanted to do is we wanted to feel like you had some control over an NPC, but that you didn't have to micromanage them. And so that's an interesting, there's so many games that have NPCs, is finding an inspiration and thinking about what our version is. So what we landed on is essentially, well, what defines a dwarf? They'll have some skills, things that they're good at, things that they can do that other dwarves can't do. But for the most part, it's what tool is in that dwarf's hand. So you put a sword in the hand of a dwarf, they're going to guard. They're going to go on guard duty. They're going to stay on watch. You put a hammer in their hand, they're going to be a mason and they're going to go repair. Put a frying pan in their hand and they're going to start cooking for everybody and so on. And the next step was we didn't want to go to this point where you're like, okay, well, now they're just crafting stations, or you have to tell them what to do all the time. And so this is where it's going to be a little interesting because they're not going to be, we want them to be somewhat predictable, but not totally predictable. So they all have to sleep. They have to have a bedroll. They will not like it or do anything if they don't have a place to sleep. So you give them a place to sleep. You can even say, this bed is yours. Nobody else sleep here. Dwarf will wake up and Dwarf will go to work. If they don't have a role, then they'll hang out around the base. And if they do have a role, they'll go do it. And then when they're done working, they'll want to eat. So you need to have a meal ready for them. You can do that. You can have a cook do it. Um, Once they've eaten, then they're going to kind of relax and socialize. If you've built the tavern kegs and you've got brew, they'll go grab a mug and they'll talk and hang out with each other. If you start singing, they'll sing with you. And they need to do that. And each one of those things they do is really important for their cycle. And if they get so the sort of place where you are maintaining them is making sure they've got a bed, making sure they're not getting killed by enemies, making sure that they've got food to eat, and then, there's some practicalities. If they're an NPC that creates resources or gathers resources, they need a place to put that. So you build a special chest for them so the NPCs put it in. If they are an NPC that would use resources, say a cook or a blacksmith, you would make a special container, and that container has the ingredients you've specifically chosen for them to be able to do. And then they'll just make the best thing they can with the ingredients you give them. You can go to a station and say, you know what, prioritize this one. I really want you to make this one thing. Um, and that's so we call it, from a design standpoint, we call it indirect control, where they're pretty autonomous, but you can kind of intervene. You can choose where to have them sleep, and that will control, what station they go to, and what, things like that. So um that autonomy, I think, it may feel weird when you got one or two and you're like, dude, what are you doing? Just do this instead of that. But once you get up to 20, being able to go on an expedition and then come back, walk into your delving and see them all doing stuff is actually a really fun moment.
Yeah, and then the other
Um,
part of it is that it keeps you directly in control of the stuff that we really think is kind of core to the player experience, which is all the building. So you're still directing them. Where you're building homes for them, and the degree to which you build that out is really entirely up to you. But they one thing that they won't do on their own is like go and build something. You still need to direct them to what the work projects they're going to be
Yeah.
on, like the monuments.
It is fun to come back to your base and see an NPC just like sitting on a stool by the fire. And you're like, what are you doing right now? Like, why aren't you working? And then you go and look and you're like, oh, their inventory is full and I didn't make a storage chest for them to dump it. So they're just hanging out by the fire, sitting there on a stool, waiting for me to make a new storage thing for them. And man, I mean, we'll get into the specifics, I think, in a future update about all the different roles. But I think you've probably heard a pattern now. We also intend this system to be something where you could imagine more kinds of NPCs in the future. In fact, I think we had to pull back on some we really wanted. Um, that I really wanted a burglar, but we never, I wanted a grocer and a burglar because I thought that was funny, because that's like how they saw Bilbo. That's how. So the clearly those are things in dwarven culture. And they're like, ah, he looks like a more like a grocer than a burglar. So I thought that'd be fun. I think that's probably going to have to be an update later. But you can imagine. I mean, I think once everybody starts playing with this, I'm expecting I'm expecting the chat to just be people talking about, oh man, I want a dwarf that can do this. I want a dwarf that can do that. And oh, what if we had one that could sing whatever song I asked them to? All kinds of fun ideas that we have on the table that we hopefully we can get to. But it's been pretty fun to sort of conceive of what makes a village, what makes a working economy, and what NPCs do that.
Oh, excuse me. I lost my voice there for a second. I have a few kind of related to what you've just been talking about. Some of the FAQ questions that I was holding for the chat. If you want me to go through some of them now.
Yeah, let's do it. And we can
Um,
also, and then we can talk a little bit about expeditions, and Bradley, we can also just talk about sort of cool visual things we've done. Oh my god, give me 1 second. My dog wants out of the room and she's barking.
no
So
worries.
you talk amongst yourselves.
Uh, so, how is
He's got
everyone?
his he's got his own NPC he's got to manage. Dog
We're so
NPC.
pro ball. Okay, I'm back. Sorry.
No worries. Um, so yeah, one of the questions people were asking was, we know that we can give equipment to NPCs.
Hmm.
You're talking about it depends on what they have in their hand will affect their task and that sort of thing. But is there a kind of a like a tier system to the equipment you give NPCs? Will that affect how well they perform their role, or does that vary from task to task?
Um, it varies, and so some of that is for complexity. Um, Sorry, I am listening. Someone asked for a picture of my dog, and that sent me down a rabbit hole of like, which picture do I send? I'll have to do that later. Um, look for that. Look for that in the chat after the Forge chat. I will share a picture of my dog. Um, the it really is dependent, and some of that is again we've been really conscious as we've been play testing and as we've been ideating that we don't want to inadvertently create something where it feels like you have to be micromanaging these dwarves. But then there's some things that are pretty natural. So if you give an NPC a weapon, they will become a guard, and they'll find a guard point and they'll stand at that guard point. And if there isn't a guard point, they'll kind of wander around. I had a moment I was playing last night. I found a survivor in the mines of Moria in the early game, and I, on a whim, gave them my best weapon, and then I just took another weapon. I was going to um, go forge myself a new one. And while I was doing that, every once in a while, a cave bear will just show up. And so a
Oh
cave bear
no.
shows up, and I hear this noise, and I go outside, and the bear had knocked out my salvager who was out picking Cuzdal oats from the farm and was knocked out. So I see this like skull pop up, and I'm like, oh no, one of my NPCs is down. And then I grab my stuff, and I'm like, I'm going to go take out the bear. And before I get there, I watch the NPC guard who I had kitted up in the full Erebor armor. So I'm sitting here in my my tier 1 stuff. I given all my tier 2 stuff to the NPC, and I watched this NPC just solo the bear before I even get there. And I was like, oh, good on you, boy. I got it. That's cool.
Nice.
So I went over and I revived the salvager and kind of rubbed some stone on it, and then they all just kind of shrugged it off and went back to work. And so I was like, okay, the system works. That was a cool moment. So weapons, the better weapons will do the better damage because the damage is tied to the weapon. Armor will help. If you give them armor, they're more survivable. The NPCs don't die. They just similar to when you're playing in co-op, they'll just fall over, and you need to go find them and hope they didn't die in a really hard to get to place. And then you revive them, and then they just figure out how to get back. And there's a couple of tricks for if they're in a place where they can't route back, you can sort of unassign them from a delving and put them back in, stuff like that. And then what else really matters? If you give a hammer, the restoration hammer, the better restoration hammers that you give to the masons, they'll be able to repair faster. But for the most part, it doesn't matter what pickaxe you give the miner. It doesn't matter. And some of those were just because we just didn't think it was. There's certain things that just didn't feel fun. We didn't need you to make 9 Durin's axes for or 20 of them. So it is a little bit of a mix. And hopefully it's going to be intuitive. Probably the only one that's not intuitive that we really thought hard about and decided not to do was the idea of the pickaxe, that you can put a miner at a gold vein and you can give them the rough pickaxe and it's okay. And our thought is, with the miner, unlike the player, so the lore here that we're thinking is, you are not a professional dwarf trained, guild trained dwarven miner. You're whoever your story is as a dwarf, but really kind of a hero and an adventurer. And so you're in the campaign, you're trying to just get out, you're doing whatever you can. So you're not setting up infrastructure when you find like an area with some gold in it, or silver, or whatever you need, or salt. You're not setting up the infrastructure, and you're not singing to the stone and doing all the things that dwarves would do in order to respect the mountain. You're basically like, I got a pickaxe, I'm just going to get that salt right now. And you're kind of destroying the vein in a way. And so the thought is that the NPC miners they're guild trained. They're good at what they do, and they can go to a gold vein and they can just extract infinite gold from that gold vein without destroying the area around it. So when we decided to do that, we thought, okay, well, they probably don't need a mithril pickaxe. They're probably used to whatever tools are around because they're really good at it. So you have to kind of think of like a dwarf with the miner skill. That's just not like, hey, I think I like mining. That represents that dwarf who says, I am a good miner. Like, we as humans can't conceive of what it means to be a good at mining for a dwarf. So it's like, a big difference. There isn't a mithril pick. Sorry, that was a bad example.
So in terms of, like you mentioned there, reassigning someone to a delving if they got stuck. I know one of the questions that the community was asking is like, what kind of area are NPCs limited to? Because some people have like massive bases over multiple hearths, and then also can you just reassign them around the different areas that you have, or is it kind of once they're assigned somewhere that they stay there?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let's see. Let me take a note here. Just made me think of something I had to talk to Michael about. Yes, so what you'll be able to reassign them. Early on you'll only have one, and then eventually you can have like 2, 3, and a larger number of delvings. And you can move them around, you can assign them, and that's so they're not stuck to one place. Right now in the current version of software, it's kind of instant, so we might need to make that a little bit more so you're not just like moving everybody around instantly. And then the other question was, what's the range? So there isn't like a leash. They're not, they basically, they will sleep every night. They will want to sleep in a bed. And as we all know, beds have to be built around hearths. So that instantly is sort of like, so much of their AI is about, they want to sleep in a bed, they want to eat, every night they want to hang out at a hearth. And so all of that sort of pulls them back towards a base. When you build a delving, it's a little bit, it's basically like, because we know a lot of people, you've got little forward operating bases, you've maybe got seven bases or camps that you've made along the way. And so by building the delve stone, you're saying this is the place where the NPCs are going to be, and you eventually can have multiples and move them around. But once you build the delve stone, that sort of acts as their spawn area. So they'll always sort of end up there at some point. And there isn't a leash, but it's not like they get to the edge of the area of the delving and stop. But they will be sort of drawn back towards it. And if if the area unloads, for memory, you're off somewhere else and the area is unloaded and we load it back up again, that's where they're going to default to be. So you'll see them sort of being back there. But if you have one and you've assigned them to gather resources, they can go pretty far. They're basically just looking for whatever it is on the ground they want to pick up, whatever food to get, whatever farms are ready to collect, and they're just going to go wherever, but they will eventually route their way back. And I would say you're probably incentivized to not let them go too far, because it can get dangerous. They can get lost, and you might have to go find them.
Yeah, that kind of leads into, I think, well, you've kind of mentioned it already, but then also into the last FAQ that I had around NPCs was um, they're not going to obviously follow the player, or they'll be, as you said, autonomous, wandering around and stuff, but they're also not going to trade on your behalf or anything like that. Like, that's your reputation that you're building up.
Yeah.
They're just going to try and stay safe as much as possible and, live their
Yeah.
life in Moria as best they can.
Yeah, they will. They'll certain roles, will use resources, and you control what resources they use by what you put in. So if they're a cook, the food you put in a pantry is what they will use. They won't use other resources. So you won't suddenly go on an adventure and come back and suddenly all your stuff is gone because they've just gone ham on smelting all the mithril you had. Um, you control that, and then when they have resources, they will put it into a special chest. So if you're going to go trading, you are going to have to go grab those trade goods that they've made, and you're going to have to transport yourself to the trader and do the trading. Any player can do that. So that, I think we've talked about in the future, is there a quality of life where you can maybe make it a little more autonomous supply chain kind of stuff? But for this version, we decided, let's see how it plays out. And hopefully those of you who've been with us since 1.0 know that we're always kind of playing the game and hearing feedback and trying to make things a little easier on the quality of life. And so I'm sure there's going to be a few things we're going to all play and go, you know what, it's a little annoying to do this. And we try to fix it in the next update.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Like, one of the best things I think our community is really good at is going, hey, do you know, this might be better if it was this way instead of that way. And it's like, oh yeah. Like, actually, once you get loads of people playing, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. So this is your reminder that if you ever have any suggestions, our feedback tickets are always open. It's
Yeah.
the best way to get info to us. But yeah, that's all the frequently asked questions I have kept aside for NPCs for the moment. So if you'd like to continue on in the direction of an expedition.
Yeah, I don't know, Bradley. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about, like, when we thought about expeditions. What would these look like? What happens when you go? So I think everyone saw from the blog, you build this table, and the table is kind of a replica of the Misty Mountains, and that was sort of fun to conceive. I think Bradley and I are both, Bradley a little bit more than me, both like hiking and camping, and in California in particular, I think a lot of national parks around where we live, you'll go to the national park, and you'll go to like Yosemite, and there'll be this wrought metal table that is a replication of the elevation of the Yosemite Valley. And I always thought those were really cool. I loved looking at those, and I was like, man, I want that. I think that this is a very dwarven thing to do, is to shape metal into the shape of mountains. And so that was the visual inspiration of the expedition table.
Yeah, we wanted to have this kind of fun moment where it feels like, you and your compatriots, especially if you're playing the game together with your friends, that you're all circled around this table, kind of plotting your next expedition. So that's really kind of like the narrative behind that part of the experience.
Yeah, and the expedition table gives us it gives us some expansion opportunity in the future. We're starting with sort of just the surrounding areas. So even though the map, it goes all the way up to Gundabad, well, maybe one day we get there. But for now, it's sort of the surrounding areas, and the idea is essentially, um, if for those of you who have played all the way through to the end of the game, you know that, like, you're probably out of salt. You're probably out of a lot of things, and We have a couple of mechanics that are going to help that. We thought about just like flipping a switch and there's an earthquake and everybody's ore is all back. But then we realized people might have built into those places, and that might be really frustrating. And so, you're basically gonna say, I need salt, I need gold, I need, maybe not mithril, but you're gonna want these things, and so you're gonna go to this table and go look for them, and then you go on basically a resource hunt. And so, at its base, at its lowest level function for the playing loop, is trying to make it so you don't feel, especially for those builder players, you don't feel like you have to go make a new world and strip mine it and bring all the stuff back. We're trying to make that a little more in fiction. But I think, Bradley, we had a lot of fun thinking about, like, okay, you go to the table, you say, okay, I want to go hunt drakes, or I want to go look for salt. And then, what happens when you sort of teleport to that spot.
Yeah. So, one thing from the start, since we knew that for other reasons we were going to be stepping outside the mountain, to the Dimril Dale or the gate, the immediate area around the Dimril Gate and the doors of Durin, that we were going to be going outside. So we wanted to have another opportunity to do that here. So every expedition begins, with you out in a little area immediately outside a new mountain. And these are just mountains somewhere within the Misty Mountains. You've seen their spot on the map, you've chosen where to go. And you always start in a little camp right outside, and then breach your way into this. And part of that was, we just really, that breach moment is something that throughout the game, in the base game, and we wanted to have as a recurring thing. It's always exciting to see what's on the other side. And so you'll start there, you breach inside, and then each one is a little self-contained mountain experience. Some of the environments will feel familiar, and that's kind of like the baseline that we're going with the expeditions. But we've taken the resources and the dangers in there, and we've remixed them in a way that, for anyone who was around when we first rolled out Sandbox, how fresh that can feel just to see things in different combinations and have locations connected in different ways. But yeah, each one ends up being, kind of like almost like a raid, that you're going on. All you and all of your companions who are currently logged in, you all need to do this together. So we wanted it to be another thing is we want it to be an experience that brings everyone together in one spot. You might spend a lot of time normally scattered throughout the world. People might have their own homes and whatnot, but this is a thing that brings everyone together to go on one, joint experience.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see combinations that people haven't seen before, and I think that's going to be pretty. The, the intention around expeditions, and I mentioned a little earlier that we really feel like they're kind of the first version of this feature, and I think there's a lot of cool things we can do with them. So in this first version, you will go, and there isn't a hard timer. There isn't you must leave now. But they really are kind of resource hunts. So you'll go, you'll get the things you want, you'll deal with whatever sort of challenges or enemies might be there, and then you'll come back. Um, I think you could imagine as you're playing them how they could get better and cooler and be more intense. But for this first version, you're going to go look for that resource. And the thing that will really, like I said, there's not like a hard timer, but eventually your packs are going to be full, and you're only going to be able to bring back so much stuff, or your energy is going to be low. And those are some creative constraints we decided to have. So you're not going to be able to sleep, and you're not going to be able to build. So you can do the quick building. You can make planks and rope ladders and things like that, and you can do field crafting. You can make yourself a torch. If your pickaxe breaks, you can make a makeshift pickaxe to just get yourself through whatever you're doing. But there will be a point when your energy is low, you're out of rations, your inventory is full, and it's time to go. And so in a way, we wanted this to feel like, for those of you who have gotten to the end and you've sort of explored all the areas of the game, if you think about it, there really is that loop that you played for however many hours in the campaign of, I'm at my base and um, now I need 10. All right, I'm going to gear up. I'm going to grab my buffs. I'm going to go to where there is 10. I'm going to deal with whatever orc camps are there. I'm going to deal with whatever danger is along the way. I'm going to get all that stuff until my energy is low and my pack is full. And I'm going to turn right around and come back. And so we wanted to kind of replicate that experience in this first version for expeditions.
I was just seeing, Mirak, I think your question has gone up the chat now, but one of the things that's worth highlighting that when you go on these adventures, they're not going to be the same. Once you've
Yes.
left, that's it. You can't go back. So there's a lot of kind of I have to imagine there's going to be a lot of people kind of like weighing up the resources at the exit, going, which do I want to bring home with me? Um,
Yeah, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One, it's just it's better for us to just sort of generate them on the fly, and that gives us a little bit more randomness. And also, I think the idea of going back um, felt like it kind of started to create a different reason why you would want to go on these things. And as soon as you can go back multiple times and go, well, I want a base here, and now it's kind of a new mountain, and for just a lot of reasons, save game logic, technical reasons, all kinds of things, and just like we don't feel like we're telling the story of recolonizing the entire Misty Mountains. We're telling the story of recolonizing Moria. And so there's a bunch of reasons for that. When you get like 3 or 4 reasons, both technical, creative, lore, that all sort of push you in one direction, it feels like it's the right decision, even if it can feel a little counterintuitive to say, why can't I just make a base here? So
one of the things on my FAQ list is do these expeditions have like difficulty levels? I might like
yeah,
because you mentioned drakes, so I assume there might be ones that are more dangerous than others. And is that kind of represented in any way, or is it just
yeah.
based on your own experience?
Yeah, basically the more elder game the resource, the harder the expedition will be. And hard is really relative. I mean, everybody everybody at this point has like mithril armor and legendary weapons, and so we didn't want to suddenly go, well, now you're fighting nothing but shadow trolls, or some like insane enemy, because that just feels like inflation. And so we want that. We don't want these things to be a cakewalk. And there will be some newish, harder enemies that will take a little bit of puzzling to figure out how to get them. But yeah, so they will, like, if you're hunting for an end game resource, those will be much harder. And what do we mean by hard? The overall enemy population will be higher. The sensitivity of the noise meter will be higher, so you might get more hordes that you have to deal with, and so that will be that's a little different from. We didn't want it to be like, okay, I just need a little bit more iron. We don't want you to have to be fighting some insane orc army that came out of nowhere for a pack full of iron. And so we wanted those to be okay. You're kind of paying the price with the loading time and going and getting it and coming back.
I had one. Sorry, I was just looking at it a second ago. There was a question that kind of led into that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. After I posted the FAQ earlier, there was quite a few concerned people wondering what happens when you die during the expedition.
Mm-hmm.
Are you kicked out, or is there a chance to
Yeah.
reclaim your stuff and that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, the way it works with expeditions is all the players on the hosted game or the server all go together. So we know, I'm going to be sarcastic here. We know everybody loves that we all have to sleep at the same time. So we thought, why not just do that again, where you all have to expedition at the same time? That was partly because these things are whole worlds, and loading 2 worlds at once would really drag your machine's memory down, and we don't want to suddenly require 64 gig of RAM to play the game. So everybody goes on the expedition. So that means that when you die, you're essentially going to just wake back up at the beginning of the expedition with all your stuff. So that's a little different from the main game. In the main game, you would die, and you'd have to go do a corpse run and get your stuff. We did that in particular because you do choose when to leave. And so we just knew there was going to be this moment of somebody dies, they haven't done their corpse run, somebody else goes and says, hey, I'm ready to go back. Maybe you guys miscommunicate and they hit confirm, and because we didn't want to do some, we all say yes, go. And so we just thought, you know what, let's just not deal with it. Let's not have you, oh, I left my chest at an expedition and I can never go back again. So for expeditions in particular, you'll always have your stuff. You'll die back at the beginning, right before you breach into the expedition, and you'll have your stuff with you. That's so it's a little bit easier, but we felt like the corpse run story isn't really an important gameplay story for expeditions.
I definitely think there's going to be
Don't get used to it though. We're not doing it for the whole game. It's just expeditions. Just kidding.
At least the relief of expeditions, not having to do the run to find your stuff, is probably
Yeah. And these things are small. Again, talking about first versions, right? These things are small. They're not intended to be, I'm gone for 2 hours, 3 hours of real time gameplay. And, we're inspired by a lot of games that have cool session based gameplay. And I think you could see how we could get to some really cool things inspired by other games. But, these are going to be small. Bradley, do you remember off the top of your head how many sort of cells? I think we're only talking about like what 5, 6, 7 cells worth of each
Yeah, I
one of
would
these. They're
say
not huge.
at the most, and this would be bigger than that, but I think at the very most it would be no bigger than like the mines. But the mines can be pretty big, so it's something Westgate to mines sized.
Yeah,
12 different map
12.
cells.
Yeah, I think 12 is our max. That's right.
Yeah, something like that.
So yeah, and I think one of the reasons why we didn't go bigger is we felt like there's a lot in this update, and we could have done an update just on expeditions, and so we felt like let's do a first version of this, and that means that the gameplay is really about going in. You're going to fight some challenges. You're going to get some resources and you're going to go. And when we feel confident that we can populate more interesting gameplay like collections or the sense of a start, middle, and end, or even a little bit of story or something like that, that's when I think we'll be comfortable making them a little bit bigger. But we've always felt like one of our values is we try not to put, it's so easy for us to make a lot of real estate, and we try to make sure there's a density sort of formula we have in our head for if we can't fill it in with a lot of interesting stuff every few seconds, then it's too big. And so we decided let's start small, and we'll get bigger when we got more gameplay.
So one of the things on that we posted in the FAQ, and this is a slight extension of this, is like as part of that, there's you mentioned before that there's only the field crafting menu. Maybe some platforms and rope ladders to help you traverse and that sort of thing. So obviously people have to plan very carefully because there's also no repairing and no like crafting stations or anything like that. You're basically going in with what's on your person, and if you can craft something with that, good for you. But you've mentioned that you've played a few of these. Do you have any top tips, or what would your loadout look like if you were going into an expedition, just to give people a sense of what kind of tools they might want to bring or what they might want to leave behind, because they might find a small resource there that's useful.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you think about the resources that are everywhere in the world, that's not going to be any different here. So anything that uses cloth scraps, wood scraps, you could choose not to bring. When you spawn in, you're at the very beginning. I mean, you can dump some stuff on the ground before you breach in. So you could bring a bunch of stuff, throw it on the ground, and then know, okay, I've got some wood here in case I need it. My personal loadout really depends on if I'm solo or not. If I'm solo, I'm probably bringing some a box, not too many. Really, what I'm trying to maximize is the point of it is filling up my pack with resources. So I don't want to take too many slots, but I want to bring some food so that I can extend it. Some Limbus is not a bad idea, or any of the higher level stuff. I probably want to load up on some buffs before I go, knowing they may not last, but if I'm playing multiplayer, I would probably insist on one of the epic items that are one of the masterwork items that we don't see get a huge amount of gameplay in the campaign, but I'd have somebody bring a wander keg full of brew, so that if my brew based buffs wore off, we could all top back off with it. So that would probably be my number one tip. But I wouldn't spend a, you know, I'd think about, do I have 10 first stage pickaxes? Maybe I'll bring one and leave it and just choose to sacrifice it for an inventory slot. Those are all going to be interesting ones. But as always, one of the rules of game development is no matter what Bradley and I think is going to be the way you play, we're always amazed at seeing how the players approach it and do things differently than we thought, and do things cooler than we thought, or more broken than we thought, or things like that. So it'll be interesting to see what everybody's tips are after doing these for a bit.
Yeah, actually, just kind of like as a general note, all the stuff that we've described in this session today, these are all largely open-ended systems, and like whenever we've had some interaction with the community, and we've made use of some of your save games, to test things out, and we're always blown away with the way that how creative everybody's been, and kind of how you've taken what we've made and kind of turned it into something bigger and more. And so part of this will be, we've done our best to craft these really cool experiences, but when we see how y'all use it, it'll give us a bunch more ideas too. We're excited for that.
As always, with game dev, you can never promise anything. But we really feel like this update is not just bringing in some of the things that we've always thought would be really awesome, and that we know this community has also agreed would be awesome, but is also, we're hoping, is a step in a setting ourselves up for a lot of cool stuff to add in as we go. And as always, we gotta wait and see how things go, and then if things go well, as we're all hoping they will, then there's a lot of room to grow with some of these new mechanics, between new kinds of NPCs, always more building stuff, expeditions getting cooler and better, traders and different trading camps and things like that. So there's a lot of opportunity, I think, for more cool content in the future.
Yeah, there's lots of exciting stuff to come. Even like, as you said, like seeing how people tackle all of these new challenges is going to be really interesting. Because I always love reading the players' stories, similar to your story about watching an NPC solo a bear and that sort of thing. Those kind of events that make your story unique, I guess. Make it your trip through Moria. So it would be
Mhm.
your expedition, or you and your buddies going on expeditions and that sort of stuff. I'm really looking forward to seeing that.
And it's gonna be
Um,
fun to see which NPCs people pick. Because
yeah.
each seed is gonna have a different group, but it's all pulled from the same pool. So it'll be really fun to see. Does everybody always recruit the same one person? Does everyone have a different crew? But I think everyone's going to be able to have a different 20, and that's going to be really fun to see.
Oh yeah, it'd be really cool to see. Is there a favorite NPC that
Right,
everyone's kind of
right. Because
wanting to show up?
you can change their clothes, like you can equip them with new clothes, but you can't change their look or their name. They are who they are. They are an autonomous dwarf that came here to be with you, and so it'll so if everybody has one named, one particular name, that's going to be the same dwarf across every world, because all the names are unique. So it'll be really interesting to see, if there's a favorite, if there's some, it's like, oh, never bring that dude in. So I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, yeah, I'd forgotten about that. That would be really cool. Um, so I have two more FAQs if we have time. I know we're getting really, really
Yeah,
close.
we're right at 10, so maybe one more. Is that okay?
Okay, yeah. Yep, I'll pick this one. So we've seen in the blogs the kind of the sneak peeks of kind of the outside world and that sort of thing. Um, some people were wondering, will there be day and night phases out there, or is it kind of like a standard set that you visit and it's always like midday when you go outside?
Bradley, you want to answer that one?
No, yeah, it's we have the full day-night cycle outside with glorious sunrise and sunset. There's also a few different weather conditions that you'll experience out there as well. When you go on expeditions, that location is always kind of inhospitable. It's snowing and foggy and cold outside expeditions, but outside the Dimmeldale and in the trading post that's at the doors of Durin, you have full day and night.
Awesome. I'm really looking
there's
forward
one
to
there's
checking
one
out the weather as
particular
well.
place in there's one particular place in the game that I don't want to spoil right now, that it is incredible to watch the sunrise.
Ooh,
With
what a
that, we
tease.
probably should wrap. Should go look at our morning bug list report.
Yep, let's end it there. Okay, awesome. Thank you for taking time out of your extremely busy schedule that you have at the moment to chat about Durin's Folk and answer some extra FAQ questions and stuff. I'll be posting a recording up on YouTube, hopefully within the next couple of days. So if people want to listen back, or if you missed the start or the end or that sort of thing, and I'll also update the FAQ channel with some of the extra stuff that we've covered here as well. Yeah. Oh, and don't forget the Get to the Gate challenge. If you're playing your way through Moria, show us or tell us your story and basically show us your selfie at the gate when you get to the end, because that's where a lot of the content's going to be. So yeah, I think that's everything. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Had a really good crew here.
See you back at the Misty Mountains.
See you then.
Bye.
Thanks all. Bye.